It was a suffocating August afternoon in 1937, the kind of oppressive heat that made even the shadows sweat. Inside the back room of the Lenox Lounge on Lenox Avenue, the air hung thick with stale gin and unacknowledged fear. Big Tony Moretti, a brute of a man fresh off the docks, slammed his fist on a mahogany table. The crystal gin glasses jumped, their contents sloshing onto the polished wood, mirroring the unsettled stomachs of Harlem's policy bankers. These were men who'd built quiet empires on nickels and dimes, their faces now a tableau of apprehension. Moretti's voice, a gravelly rumble, sliced through the tension. A 30% cut. Effective next Friday. From every single policy slip. Harlem, he declared, was theirs for the taking, and no one would stand in their way. It was an impossible declaration, a challenge to the very soul of a community. How could a burgeoning criminal enterprise, built on the intricate web of trust and necessity within Harlem, withstand the full, brutal might of Lucky Luciano's commission? How could a single man, Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson, not only repel this invasion, but force the most powerful crime syndicate in America to simply stand down? The answer lay not in bullets, but in a secret maneuver, an unseen chess move that would reshape the rules of power itself. To truly grasp what unfolded in that sweltering August, you first need to understand the men and the game itself. In the late 1930s, the Harlem numbers game wasn't merely illegal gambling. It was the vibrant, beating heart of the community. It was the unofficial bank, the employment agency, the social safety net that the official world denied. Every nickel and dime wagered circulated back into Harlem, funding local businesses, creating jobs, offering a rare semblance of economic independence in a world designed to keep black communities tethered. It was a multi-million-dollar enterprise, a testament to Harlem's ingenuity and resilience. And now a 30% cut wasn't just a demand for money. It was an insult, a declaration of war on a system that worked for Harlem, orchestrated by Harlem. The stakes weren't just profit margins, they were the autonomy, the very spirit of a neighborhood that refused to be subjugated. At the head of this looming storm stood Big Tony Moretti. His ambition was as vast as his hulking frame, and he was the iron fist of Luciano's insatiable hunger for control. Moretti's objective was chillingly simple: integrate Harlem's lucrative numbers racket into the Commission's ever-expanding portfolio by any means necessary. He was dangerous not for his intellect, but for the implicit, overwhelming threat of Luciano's limitless resources and the ruthless violence that had already brought entire cities to heel. Against him, however, was a different kind of power. Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson was Harlem's intellectual, a man who could quote poetry as easily as he could orchestrate a heist. He was a chess master, always thinking 10 steps ahead, his mind a labyrinth of contingencies. Bumpy was dangerous not because of brute force, but because he understood the intricate web of power, loyalty, and economics that truly ran the city. He commanded the unwavering respect of the community he protected, not out of fear, but out of a deep, earned loyalty. Caught in the precarious middle was Silas "Slick" Jones, a fast-talking numbers runner whose network was as wide as Bumpy's, but whose ambition often outpaced his caution. Silas was vulnerable, a man with a sick wife and a growing gambling debt, terrified of Moretti's wrath yet undeniably tempted by the promise of commission protection and a bigger slice of the pie. His weakness, fear, and a longing for stability made him an unpredictable pivot in this high-stakes game. The fate of Harlem and Bumpy's reputation as its protector would hinge on these intersecting lives. The threat approached like a slow, inexorable storm front. Moretti's collectors, burly men in ill-fitting suits, began showing up at policy banks, their presence a silent, terrifying declaration. They demanded their tribute with thinly veiled threats, their eyes promising consequences that needed no words. Fear rippled through the streets of Harlem, a chill that had nothing to do with the August heat. Small-time operators, lacking Bumpy's backbone and strategic foresight, began paying up, convinced that resistance was futile. The whispers spread like wildfire. "They're too big, Bumpy can't fight them." Silas "Slick" Jones, with his sick wife and mounting debts, found himself increasingly cornered. He became a prime target for Moretti's intimidation tactics, his loyalty to Bumpy wavering with every new threat leveled against his family. The pressure was immense, a vice tightening around his life, forcing him to consider options he once thought unthinkable. But Bumpy Johnson wasn't idle. While Moretti's men swaggered, Bumpy moved like a phantom through Harlem, an unlit cigar always clenched between his teeth, a silent testament to his patience and the burning thoughts behind his eyes. He didn't just gather intelligence from street informants. He absorbed it from the very rhythm of Harlem itself. He knew every street corner, every policy slip, every whisper of discontent or loyalty. Quietly, meticulously, he forged alliances not with other mobsters, but with unexpected figures, powerful church leaders, respected community elders, even certain beat cops on the take, who understood the delicate, unspoken balance Bumpy maintained. The chessboard was being set, each piece carefully positioned. Moretti, brimming with confidence in his brute force, continued to escalate. He ordered his men to disrupt numbers draws, turning local gambling houses into scenes of chaos. Runners who dared to refuse his demands mysteriously went off-grid, sometimes for days, sometimes longer, only to reappear bruised and broken, or not at all. Then came the stark message. One particular Tuesday, a key policy banker, known for his stubbornness and unwavering loyalty to Bumpy, was found beaten severely in an alley behind his operation. It was a brutal public display, a chilling warning to anyone still contemplating resistance. This was the breaking point for Silas. Terrified his options dwindling, he made a desperate plea to Bumpy. He offered to provide information, anything he knew about Moretti's operations, if Bumpy could guarantee his family's safety. Bumpy, with a subtle nod, agreed. But his reasons were far from what Silas imagined. Bumpy didn't just need an informant. He needed a pawn, one that Moretti would believe was turning against him, a piece on the board designed to be sacrificed. Bumpy's genius lay in his ability to turn his enemy's perceived strength, their control over the game, into their ultimate weakness. He began to orchestrate a series of seemingly insignificant events, a quiet sabotage. A specific numbers draw was accidentally compromised, its results inexplicably skewed, leaving both winners and losers confused. A few key runners, chosen not for their loyalty but for their dispensability, mysteriously went off-grid for a day, causing minor but noticeable disruptions. And a series of anonymous, carefully crafted tips about Moretti's men found their way to the precinct Captain Bumpy knew was incorruptible, a man who, unlike others, couldn't be bought or threatened into looking the other way. These weren't random acts. They were calculated disruptions, designed to make the numbers game in Harlem appear suddenly, inexplicably, and profoundly unprofitable to Moretti. The stage was now set for a confrontation that would redefine power in the underworld. The climax arrived not with the roar of gunfire or the screech of tires in a dark alley, but in the sterile quiet of a secluded dining room in a downtown hotel. A neutral location, brokered by a powerful, legitimate figure whose ties stretched into both worlds, a man who understood that unchecked violence was bad for everyone's business. Big Tony Moretti, radiating menace, strode in, his broad shoulders practically filling the doorway, expecting to dictate terms, to finalize the takeover he believed was already inevitable. He anticipated a surrender, perhaps a final, futile negotiation. But Bumpy Johnson was already seated, a still figure at the head of the polished mahogany table, an unlit cigar in his hand, and a faint, knowing smile playing on his lips. He didn't rise. He didn't flinch. Moretti took his seat, the chair groaning under his weight, his eyes narrowed, searching for a crack in Bumpy's composure. The air was thick with unspoken threats, with the memory of the beaten banker, the disappeared runners, the subtle, creeping fear Moretti had unleashed upon Harlem. He expected Bumpy to bargain, to beg for a smaller cut, to acknowledge the overwhelming force brought against him. But Bumpy didn't threaten violence. He didn't even mention the beatings or the intimidation. Instead, he simply laid out a cold, hard truth, a truth that landed with more impact than any punch. "Moretti," Bumpy began, his voice calm, almost conversational. "Harlem is a delicate ecosystem. You see a pool of money. I see a living thing." He paused, letting the words hang. Your men, your tactics, and they've turned it into a logistical nightmare. Every attempt you make to control it, to squeeze it, only makes it more volatile, more unpredictable. You're trying to tame a ghost, Big Tony." Bumpy then laid out his hand, not with a flourish, but with surgical precision. He explained how his disruptions, the compromised draws, the suddenly unavailable runners, the perfectly timed anonymous tips to the incorruptible precinct captain, weren't random acts of resistance. They were calculated counter-moves. He showed how every attempt by Moretti to impose his will would be met with an invisible, untraceable response, making the entire operation a financial black hole. He didn't just understand the numbers, he understood the psychology of the game, the intricate dance of trust and expectation that made it viable. He showed Moretti how the numbers could simply disappear. The faucet could be turned off. "You want 30% of something that no longer exists?" Bumpy asked, his smile widening slightly, a glint in his eye. "You want to run a racket where every dollar you try to grab costs you two to collect and lands you in a fight with a community on the verge of open rebellion?" He wasn't just protecting a racket, he was protecting an ecosystem, and he had the keys to its destruction. He could make Harlem's numbers game so unprofitable, so chaotic, so thoroughly poisoned, that even the formidable commission would find it an unpalatable, unwinnable war. Then came the moment that etched itself into legend. Slowly, deliberately, Bumpy raised the unlit cigar to his lips. His thumb flicked the lighter, and a small, steady flame appeared, illuminating his face in the dimly lit room. He lit the cigar, drawing a deep, calm breath, the curling smoke a silent, powerful declaration of victory. There was no need for words, no need for threats. The message was delivered. Harlem was not for sale, and Bumpy Johnson, the quiet strategist, was not to be trifled with. Moretti, seeing the unwinnable war, the poisoned chalice Bumpy had presented, could only sit in stunned silence. The blood drained from his face as he realized the full depth of Bumpy's play. He had walked into a trap, not of violence but of pure, unadulterated strategic brilliance. The immediate aftermath was swift and decisive. Within 72 hours, Moretti's men, their swagger gone, their pockets lighter, began retreating from Harlem. Their presence dwindled from an intimidating occupation to nothing more than a bad memory. The fear they had sown began to recede, replaced by a quiet sense of triumph and renewed respect for the man who had outmaneuvered the unstoppable. Within 6 months, through back channels and hushed conversations, Lucky Luciano's commission issued an unofficial yet ironclad decree. Harlem was Bumpy's territory. It was a protected zone from outside interference, a recognition that some battles, no matter how lucrative they appeared, simply weren't worth the cost. Luciano, ever the pragmatist, understood that Bumpy Johnson was an immovable force, a strategic genius who knew how to turn strength into weakness. The numbers game in Harlem continued to thrive under Bumpy's shrewd management, solidifying his legend as the man who stared down the mightiest crime syndicate in America and won not with bullets, but with brains. In the concrete jungle of New York City, where reputation was currency and power was everything, this was more than just a victory. It was a masterclass in strategic thinking. It proved that true power isn't always about who throws the hardest punch, but who plays the longest game, who can see 10 moves ahead. Respect isn't given, it's earned with every calculated decision, every unseen chess move. The question echoes through time. Was Bumpy Johnson merely a criminal protecting his turf, or was he a strategic leader, safeguarding his community from a greater, more oppressive evil? His legacy, like the smoke from his cigar, remains in the air, a testament to the quiet power of intellect against brute force. If this story of strategy, power, and defiance gripped you, hit that like button to let us know. And if you haven't already, what are you waiting for? Subscribe to join our ranks and uncover more forgotten histories. Tell us in the comments, was Bumpy Johnson a villain or a hero in this high-stakes game? And make sure you share this untold tale with someone who appreciates a mind game more than a firefight. We've got another insane story lined up for you next, so turn on notifications so you don't miss a single move.